Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Rabbi Julia Andelman, Director of Community Engagement at JTS, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's session of our fall series, Two Are Better Than One, Friendship in Jewish Text, Thought, and Life. A special welcome to any first-time participants, and you can view past sessions at the link that was in the email you received earlier today, or if you didn't get the email, we will post the link as well in the chat. We are really pleased to have a visiting professor teaching us today, Dr. Benedicte Sere. I do not speak French, but hopefully I did that okay. She is a visiting professor at JTS this semester from the University of Paris, Nanterre. She will say it all correctly, but such a special privilege and treat to be taught by her today. And her session is on friendship and interfaith engagement. I also, and Tani will introduce her more fully, I also want to express our gratitude to our sponsor for today, which is Temple Israel of Albany, who have sponsored at the Chacham level. We're so grateful to you, and we hope that you will inspire other synagogues whose congregants have been learning with us to do the same. So we really appreciate your support, and for those who are interested in considering sponsorship, which you can do as a group, as I'm assuming the synagogue has done, which makes it more affordable for everyone. We have 3 sponsorship levels, and there's more information going into the chat on that as well. So before I turn it over to Tani, I just want to acknowledge that it's just such weighty, difficult times right now, and whatever your political persuasion is, it's just a really hard time if you care about what's going on across the ocean. So I know I'm feeling a lot of heaviness. I suspect almost everyone here is, and I just wanted to name that, and hopefully the theme of our session today can give us a little bit of intellectual stimulation to maybe bracket some of that for a moment, and also maybe give us some hope and ideas as well, since certainly not all of the current conflict, but an aspect of the current conflict has to do with religion. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say on that, and I'll turn it over to Tani now.
Thank you, Rabbi Andelman. So just to go over the format for our session, Dr. Sere will pause for questions periodically throughout the class. We'll also have a Q&A period at the end. You can use the chat feature to submit your questions to Rabbi Julia Andelman. During the Q&A period, Rabbi Andelman will select a few of the questions to present to Dr. Sere. Since we receive a large number of questions, we would appreciate it if you could express your question both clearly in complete sentences and also concisely. For any technical or logistical questions, please initiate a private chat with either myself or Ellie Gettinger. The PowerPoint presentation for today's class was in the email that you received earlier today. We'll be screen sharing it as well, and I'll also post a link in the chat. So pleased to have Dr. Benedicte Sere teaching us in our webinar series for the first time today. She's a member of the Institut Universitaire de France and associate professor at the University of Paris. She's currently visiting professor at JTS. Dr. Sere wrote her first PhD on friendship in Aristotle's commentaries from the 13th century until the 15th century. She has also authored several books, and you can find more information on that in the bio that appears with the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Sere.
So I thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm very pleased to be here to share with you a couple of thoughts in this actually very heavy time. But my focus will be on Middle Ages, since I am a medievalist, and we can open these thoughts to nowadays. I would say that in a world where religious differences have often, if not always, been a source of division, one of the most catalysts for interfaith understanding can be found through the concept of friendship. And I dare say, through a well-understood concept of friendship. I propose today in this talk to follow the Aristotelian framework of the concept, which bears its fruits when well understood. So friendship emerges as a powerful tool for forging connections, fostering receptiveness to others, or nurturing understanding. Yet, and this is my point, friendship can also, in the worst case, turn into a snare when instrumentalized as a subtle vehicle of enticing, attracting, propagating one's convictions, even aiming conversion or proselytism. What David Berger phrases as, I quote, dialogue as a more sophisticated expression of the missionary impulse. More subtly, friendship can also, in the best case, regarding interfaith dialogue, be understood as the effort to overcome difference by finding what we have in common. And this is the ambivalence of friendship that I'd like to explore and clarify within an Aristotelian framework. So my claim is that interfaith engagement, based on a strictly Aristotelian definition of friendship, can be understood not as the effort to overcome difference by finding what we have in common, but rather the exact opposite. Friendship as the openness to the difference, to acknowledge the otherness and learn about difference, and in the very deep of this difference, to welcome the other as the other and live together. And I shall explore this matter through three central inquiries. First question, is Hebraism a manifestation of friendship? Can convivencia, second point, be seen as an embodiment of friendship? Third point, is encounter synonym with friendship? And first and foremost, let's get started with Aristotle. His definition of friendship provides us with a significant framework for understanding the concept of friendship in and out itself. Aristotle's teaching on friendship is well known in Nicomachean Ethics, Book 8 and Book 9. And Tanya, do you share the screen? Because yes, you do share the screen.
I'll go ahead and put it up now. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I propose to read together some very important, even well-known text from Aristotle. So yes, there are three kinds of friendships. Those who love each other for their utility do not love each other for themselves, but in virtue of some good which they get from each other. So too, with those who love for the sake of pleasure, it is not for their character that men love really wicked people, but because they find them pleasant. Therefore, those who love for the sake of utility love for the sake of what is good for themselves. And those who love for the sake of pleasure do so for the sake of what is pleasant to themselves, and not insofar as the other is the person loved, but insofar as he is useful or pleasant. And thus, these friendships are only incidental, for it is not as being the man he is that the loved person is loved, but as providing some good or pleasure. Such friendships then are easily dissolved if the parties do not remain like themselves. For if the one party is no longer pleasant or useful, the other ceases to love him. Now, perfect friendship is the friendship of men who are good and alike in virtue. For this we wish well alike to each other good, and they are good themselves now, those who wish well to their friends for their sake are most truly friends, for they do this by reason of own nature and not incidentally. Therefore, the friendship lasts if they are good, and goodness is an enduring thing. And such a friendship is, as might be expected, permanent, since there meet in it all the qualities that friends should have. But to a friend we say we ought to wish what is good for his sake. Let's summarize the main principles of Aristotle's teachings. Aristotle categorizes friendship into 3 types. Useful friendships are formed between individuals whose primary aim is to collaborate in achieving practical goals, such as co-workers or teammates. Pleasurable friendships involve people who consistently enjoy each other's company, like friends who invite to meals or social outings. Useful and pleasurable friendships will come with advantages. They are defined by their specific smaller scale objectives. Useful friends focus on achieving tasks, while pleasurable friends focus on savoring each other's company. The foundation of these friendships lies in simply utility of pleasure. However, these friendships have also downsides. Once the task or enjoyment disappears, so does the friendship. Useful and pleasurable friendships are primarily motivated by what individuals can gain from them and for them. And this is why Aristotle considered them imperfect compared to the last type, virtuous friends. For Aristotle, the most profound friendships transcend utility or pleasure and revolve around mutual self-improvement. These friendships are rare and challenging to these as virtuous, challenging to from, yet they are the most crucial for leading a virtuous focus isn't on accomplishing task or having a good time together. Instead, it's primarily on each other as individuals, with attention to character development and flourishing. They want their friends to be virtuous people and live good lives for their own sake. All in all, in a sense, there is only one genuine form of friendship, characterized by a key criterion: for the sake of the friend. And this signifies a selfless and outward-oriented approach where the friend is considered for its own sake without any self-interest. It embodies absolute disinterestedness with the devotion to the other person for its own sake. So how would you think about an opposite concept of Aristotelian friendship? In other words, friendship stands in direct opposition to instrumentalization, as it emphasizes genuine care for the other person's well-being. So we can summarize saying there is 2 movements. The Aristotelian friendship, the Aristotelian genuine friendship being a centripetal logic, whereas instrumentalization would embody a centrifugal logic. That said, how can we apply such a conception, such a definition of genuine friendship to interfaith engagement. And I will explore this definition through three key concepts: Hebraism, convivencia, and encounter. But before going further, I would ask if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.
We don't have questions yet. I think people aren't used to being invited to ask so early, but so please folks, feel free to submit your questions at any time, as always. It's very interesting what you opened with, that the idea that finding commonality can be manipulated in ways that make friendship a double-edged sword. It really rings true in terms of a lot of alliances that seem to be at work today now, and I hadn't thought about it in those terms. So thank you. Why don't I'm tempted to invite you to continue, since I think people are still formulating questions now.
Sure. It's very early to think about all the overview of the topic. So I go on, asking this question: is Hebraism a modality of friendship? Tanya, could you go on with this? Yes. So within the realm of interfaith engagement, embracing the concept of friendship as delineated by Aristotle calls for profound receptivity to the other through their unique linguistic and cultural expressions, what we may term Hebraism. This entails actively seeking to understand and appreciate the religious and cultural language of the other, delving into their scriptures, rituals, traditions with genuine curiosity and respect. By doing so, we cultivate a sense of acquaintance that transcends mere tolerance, forging deeper and more meaningful connections across religious boundaries. So how did it work out in ancient societies? And my first case study will take place in the 12th century in Saint Victor Abbey. Saint Victor Abbey stood as a distinguished center of spiritual scholarship, renowned for its exceptional masters, including Hugues of Saint Victor, Richard of Saint Victor, and Andrew of Saint Victor. And these leading masters not only imparted their teachings within the monastery's walls, but also penned biblical commentaries that resonated far beyond. And in the middle of the 14th century, the famous theologian and Oxford Franciscan Roger Bacon seemed to emphasize the innovative work of Andrew of Saint Victor, one of the leading theologians of Saint Victor Abbey. And he wrote, I quote, and you can read it on the slide: "We should go back to the original Hebrew text. And if Andrew is right, we should believe the Hebrew, not him. But we have to commend him greatly for pointing us to many dubious spots in our translation. And we refer us to the Hebrew so that we may search for explanations with greater certainty of the roots." And as Franz van Leer, Andrew's best historian, suggests, it is not implausible to propose that Jewish exegetes may have played a role in inspiring a pivotal hermeneutical shift in Christian exegesis during the 12th century. In this context, the Jewish Pshat commentators may have provided the model for Andrew's exegetical technique. Andrew's engagement with the Christian context was not without controversy. He faced accusations of being a Judaizer, a charge rooted in the polemical atmosphere of Jewish-Christian relations, characterized by disputes, apologetics, and mutual defenses. And the accusations of Judaizing were driven by fears of potential religious syncretism, the obsession with proselytism and proselytism, and conversion efforts. However, for Andrew of Saint-Victor, the obsession, his methodology held greater significance than theological debates or doctrinal foundations. And Franz van Leer writes about Andrew, he had been seen as the great renovator in medieval exegesis, the exponent of the Victorian exegetical revolution in biblical interpretation. One could argue that he was more a scholar than a polemicist, displaying a remarkable level of advancement for his time and among his Christian peers. And another historian, Monselera Curia, also suggests that Rashbam might have instructed Eugen Andrew of Saint-Victor, potentially being one of the Jews who engaged them in literal interpretation of the Pentateuch. Andrew's interpretations closely resembled those of Rashbam and Joseph Kara, indicating that he might have been influenced not only by Rashbam, but also by Joseph Kara. And his approach involved setting aside theological judgment in favor of consulting Jewish sources for the literal interpretation of the biblical text, which he incorporated into his commentaries. Much of the Jewish material in Andrew's commentaries likely resulted from personal contexts, as there were no Latin translations of these Hebrew commentaries available at that time. So the proximity of the Jewish school in Paris to the cathedral and for Saint-Victor Abbey suggests that Andrew had ample opportunity for such contact, oral contact with Jews, and why not friendly contacts. And it has been pointed out that Andrew's complete reliance upon his Jewish teachers for access to the Hebrew text of scripture and interpretation of words and phrases. To sum up, I would say that Andrew of Saint-Victor's engagement with Jewish scholarship represented a remarkable intersection of Jewish and Christian intellectual exchange during the 12th century, marked by his innovative methodology and his openness to Jewish sources and interpretation. And the sake of learning here overshadows the interest and process of friendship, strictly speaking. In other words, according to Aristotle's criteria on friendship, one cannot here speak of genuine friendship between Jews and Christians in the 12th century. Hebrew language was a goal in and out itself. It was not the will to truly meet the religious other, the Jew or the Christian. My second case study deals with Nicholas of Lyra and polemicist heroism. And the novelty with Nicholas of Lyra, who is the central figure responsible for integrating Jewish exegetical traditions into Christian biblical studies. His work served as a conduit for transmitting rabbinic traditions to generations of Christian scholars, or harnessing Jewish insights into scripture while dismissing perceived Jewish errors. Nicholas frequently drew upon Rashi, whom he referred to as Master Solomon, as well as the Targum, Joseph Flavius, the sages of the Mishnah, Rambam, and Moses Darshan. His commentaries became the most widely copied and disseminated of all medieval Christian Bible commentaries, with over 800 manuscripts preserved. Nicholas displayed a distinct preference for Jewish interpretations over patristic ones, favoring the Hebrew text over the Vulgate. On occasion, he took a critical approach to the Latin text and used the Hebrew to support his choice among several variants. His reliance on Hebrew was not exclusive. He considered other factors, including insights from Andrew of St. Victor, from whom Jewish sources were as vital as Christian ones in his commentaries. Nicholas employed the Jewish scriptures to demonstrate Christian truth, a common theme in anti-Jewish polemics. He used Jewish scriptures to highlight perceived errors in Jewish beliefs. This emphasizes on using the Hebrew scriptures led to the learning of Hebrew in Franciscan and Dominican studia, aimed at training preachers and making them skilled in theological controversies. And Diana Klepper's research highlights a link between Nicholas' profound knowledge of Jewish texts and his anti-polemics. Mendicant polemicists like Nicholas, well-versed in Hebrew, were better equipped to engage in disputes with the Jews using their own texts against them. Notably, anti-Jewish polemicists refrained from using the gospel to argue their points, marking a significant departure from previous approaches. And the question of Nicholas' Hebraic mastering has been raised. All in all, Nicholas of Lyra displayed an ambivalent stance toward Judaism and the Jews. He possessed a deep familiarity with rabbinical literature and expressed some sympathy for it in his exegetical work, acknowledging the value of inspiring drone for Jewish texts. However, his criticism of Judaism was severe and weighty, particularly following the expulsion of Jews from France in 1306. And this did not deter him from condemning Jews in alignment with the prevailing Christian sentiment of his time. His pursuit of Hebrew mastery served as a means to engage in more effective disputes with Jews or to facilitate proselytization efforts among them. So here we can conclude that Hebraism is definitely not a friendship, rather the opposite. And my third case study is more about Renaissance Hebraism in the 16th century. And during the Renaissance, a current of Christian Hebraism emerged, originated in Italy and subsequently spreading to Germanic regions. This movement was part of an integral part of the broader humanist endeavor to return to the sources and their original languages, referred to as ad fontes. Hebrew played a central role in humanist education, leading to the establishment of Hebrew chairs in major European universities. New Latin translations of the Bible were produced under the banner of Hebraica Veritas, signifying the quest for truth through a return to the original language. Polyglot Bibles were introduced, presenting the Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic texts side by side. And the pursuit for Hebraica Veritas led Christian Hebraists such as Pico de la Mirandola or Johannes Reuchling, or later Johannes Buxtorf, to delve into post-biblical Jewish literature, including Kabbalah and the Talmud. And the Reformation heightened interest in the Hebrew Bible with the rules for translating the Bible in 1532. Luther consulted Hebraists to grasp the precise meaning of the Hebrew terms. Renaissance Hebraism involved close collaborations between Christian Hebraists and Jewish scholars, fostering the exchange of ideas and knowledge between the two intellectual communities. So the Hebrew Dictionary and Grammar Guide that has exerted significant influence on the study of Hebrew during the Renaissance was the one from Tishby, Sefer HaTishby of Elias Levita, a Hebrew dictionary and grammar guide, which was influential in the study of Hebrew during the Renaissance. And Sebastian Münster Trilingual Dictionary was also the resource covering Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, and it became essential for Renaissance Hebrew studies. And these humanist Hebraists made substantial contributions to the study of the Hebrew language and literature during the Renaissance, acting as intermediaries between Jewish and Christian scholarship and contributing to the broader cultural and intellectual developments of the era. Renaissance Hebraism in some cases promoted a more tolerant attitude toward Jews and Judaism. From Christian point of view, scholars engaging with Hebrew often developed a deeper appreciation from Jewish culture and Jewish religion, leading to a more positive attitudes in certain quarters. However, it's important to note that interest in texts, language, and Jewish heritage did not necessarily imply benevolent attitude toward Jews themselves. For instance, Johannes Reuchling was a pioneering figure of Renaissance Hebraism and played a central role in defending the rights of Jews against the Inquisition and against the Dominican order. While Reuchling acknowledged the interest and legitimacy of post-biblical Jewish literatures like the Talmud, he remained deeply ambivalent about Jews. He deplored the expulsions and persecutions of Jews not because of their impact on Jews themselves, but because they jeopardized the study of Hebrew and the Bible. Then, in light of Aristotle's criteria for friendship, it becomes clear that these postures and attitudes within Hebraism failed to demonstrate true friendship. Hebraism often served as a tool for disputes, offensive tactics against Judaism, and the use of Jewish tools, language, customs, to criticize or attack the other religion, that of the Jews. It did not aim to bring individuals closer or facilitate encounters with the other, but rather to employ their own tools, language, and customs to oppose them. In the best case, Hebraism aimed to promote learning while preserving the Hebrew language, but did not extend such preservation to the Jews themselves. Now my second point about convivencia, but before I go on with this point, which will be shorter than Hebraism, I would make a pause. And Julian, what would you think? Is there any question at that point? Or should I go further to my second and third point?
We do have questions. Thank you. Okay. So one question, just going back a little bit, or I guess a few questions on the initial framework that you shared. One person asked if Aristotle would he consider the idea that that a relationship could start as a utilitarian friendship or friendship oriented towards pleasure, and then as relationships deepen, move on to the virtue-based friendship? Or is it, you know, if it starts for reasons of utility or pleasure, that's like it can't really move beyond that?
That's a great question. That's a great question, because then you would think that the shift would be like from a nature of one friendship, the utilitarian one, to another nature. So it's not a point of intensity. It's not that you begin with a little friendship and then you increase your friendship in a deeper one. In Aristotle's mind, it's two different natures of friendships. So in the commentaries on Aristotle, for example, in the Middle Ages, commentators don't think you can switch from one friendship to another, meaning that you start with non-genuine friendship and then you reach a genuine friendship. Why do they think you can't? Because it's not the same friendship. You are not in the same ground. You are not with the same aims. You can switch your aims, but then you restart a friendship in some way. You know what I mean? So what is very important is to think that in Aristotle's mind and in the medieval commentators' mind, you only have two friendships, a true one and a non-genuine one. And that the real departure.
Thanks. A couple of people asked if there are any connections between any of the Aristotelian ideas that you're sharing and Martin Buber and his I and Thou work.
Yes, I will speak about Martin Buber, which is one of the core thinker of dialogue, and I will speak about that just in a couple of minutes because it's at the center of my talk. Right. To think about dialogue and to think if dialogue is genuine friendship according to Aristotle. So if you don't mind waiting,
of course, a
couple of minutes.
Okay. And do you want to move on, or can you take one more question?
Yes. If you don't mind, maybe I can move on because
sure.
The answers will be in the following. Yes.
Absolutely.
So now I would question my second point, my second concept, which is convivencia. Convivencia is a Spanish term translating to coexistence, let's say, or living together. So it has held sway in the field of medieval Iberian studies since its introduction in 1948. It refers to this historical epoch in medieval Spain when Christians, Muslims, and Jews coexisted, occasionally harmoniously, fostering a rich cultural and intellectual exchange. Ramon Llull, for example, is one of the most prominent Christian authors of this time. He's a man of the court in the reign of James I. He advocated for the voluntary inclusion of non-Christians, often referred to as infidels, into the Christian faith. And this stance initially emphasized tolerance as an essential aspect. However, it should not be misconstrued as its ultimate aim was still the conversion to the Catholic faith. So Ramon Llull paved the way for a policy of assimilation by highlighting commonalities among the three religions, bringing them closer together with the intention of uniting them, albeit with the ultimate goal of uniting them within Christianity. So among historians, there is no consensus regarding the true essence of significance of convivencia in medieval Spain. Some perceive it as a period marked by peaceful coexistence and cultural exchange, religious tolerance, and harmonious relationships, even to the proximity of friendship. Others highlight the presence of greater friction, suspicion, conflicts, challenges, inequalities, and discrimination. It is essential to recognize that tension, violence, and conflict were not necessarily incompatible with peaceful coexistence in the broader context of interfaith relations. And Benjamin Gamble cautions against viewing convivencia as an image of total harmony, advocating instead for an interpretation of envisions a pluralistic society with communities existed, conducted business together, and influenced each other's ideas, sometimes in competition, that occasionally turn into hatred. Yet, in recent years, the concept of convivencia has generated unease among historians for several reasons. Some argue that the concept has become an impediment rather than a help to the current trends of historiography. Questions have a reason about whether convivencia should be seen as a myth or reality, a difficult experience or dialectic rather than a straightforward concept. And this skepticism is exemplified by, for example, by Maya Soifer's famed article entitled "Beyond Convivencia: Critical Reflections on the Historiography of Interfaith Relations in Christian Spain in 2009. And she showed that there is a recent trend of historiography to revisit and refine the idyllic portrayal of medieval Spain or of the golden about Andalusian society, examining recurring patterns of coexistence, conflict, conversion, and assimilation. Scholars today often refer to a dysfunctional model of convivencia. And it's a delicate balance between toleration and persecution, friendship and hatred, unless tolerance and intolerance are inseparable. The critique is the concept of convivencia coined in 1948, and I refrain from commenting on this date. This critique says that convivencia was more an idealization portraying interfaith harmony than an authentic historical reality. Some argue that convivencia has been an instrumentalized and manipulated tool to address contemporary and modern issues, making it susceptible to distortion and reinvention. The question of whether convivencia can truly be equated with friendship through harmonious coexistence remains a topic of intense historical scrutiny, excuse me. Undeniably, it may have evolved into a modern myth rather than representing historical friendship and coexistence. And my third and last point is about the concept of encounters, where encounters truly friendship, meaning the efforts to engage with the other. In the Jewish studies, the historiography of polemics and debates, the famous Jewish-Christian polemics, have been lengthily studied since Isidor Loeb, Adolf Polanski, to Chaim Maccoby, Daniel Lasker, Frank Talmadge, David Berger, and Trotner Kroman, Philippe Bobichon, or more recently, Paula Tartakov. It is somehow ironic that there is a recent trend among historians of Jewish-Christian relations to de-emphasize persecutions and stress the peaceful aspects of interfaith coexistence. In other words, there are being an increasing emphasis on terms like confluence, dialogue, and counter-interaction, interchange, to underline the more positive aspects of Jewish-Christian relationships. This shift aims to correct the overly bleak perception of Europe as a persecuting society. Only two examples. Mark Saperstein article, Christian and Jews, Some Positive Images. Saperstein seeks to counteract the selective focus on negative aspects in studies that paint a grim picture of Jewish-Christian relations. This approach is reminiscent of Byron's critique of the lacrimose conception of Jewish history, which views the medieval Jewish experience primarily as a succession of tragedies in the, I quote, veil of tears. And Mark Saperstein argues that it's, I quote, it's essential to recognize that different, more positive perceptions of these relations as well. He points to he points to instances where religious leaders in the context of moral exhortation acknowledged positive qualities in the other community worthy of emulation. For instance, Abelard, Peter Abelard, the most famous 12th century French philosopher, praised the Jews, saying, I quote, "Surely no nation is known or is even believed to have suffered so much for God, and we constantly endure," end of quote, which suggests a genuine empathy, if not friendship, toward Jews. Another example, positive views of Christian behavior can be found on the Jewish side with Shlomo Alami in 1415, and his Christian attentive behavior during church services. And this text, I quote Shlomo Alami, this is a very famous paragraphs because of praising the Christian and blaming the Jewish attitudes during services. Look what happened when a congregation of Jews gathers to hear words of Torah from a sage. Slumber weighs upon the eyes of the officers, others converse about trivial affairs. The preacher is dumbfounded by the talking of men and the chattering of women standing behind the synagogue. If he should reproach them because of their behavior, they continue to sin, behaving corruptibly, abominably. This is the opposite of the Christians. When their men and women gather to hear a preacher, they stand together in absolute silence, marveling at his rebuke, and not one of them dozes as he pours out his words upon them. They await him as they do the rain, eager for the waters of his counsel. We have not learned it properly from those around us. However, this admiration should be viewed in the context of moralistic self-blame from an author to his fellow Jews. It may sound like admiration, but it appears to function more as a tool to awaken his own community. And this helps to conclude that admiration and empathy do not equate to friendship. Empathy is neither friendship, and that these positive images are more reflective of the current historiographical trend than the real history of Jewish-Christian relations. Let's call it ironism or pseudo-ironism, emphasizing that it falls short of genuine friendship. And my last example is about the Dictionary of Jewish-Christian Relations, edited by Edward Kessler and Neil Renborn in 2005. This Dictionary of Jewish-Christian Relations delves into the many facets of these complex relations, which have been marked by periods of mutual understanding, tolerance, and collaboration, as well as times of persecution, anti-Semitism, and theological tensions. It's aimed to provide objective information and foster interreligious dialogue by presenting diverse historical and contemporary perspectives on this interaction. And for example, if we take the entry dialogue, let's be aware, reading the entry, that the term dialogue could be as ambiguous as friendship itself, as the term friendship itself. The articles say that the dialogue with people of living faith and ideology, the FI, states we feel able with integrity to commend the way of dialogue as one in which Jesus Christ can be confessed in our world today, and, I quote, page 125, to assure our partners in dialogue that we come not as manipulators, but as genuine fellow pilgrims. End of quote. And this set of principles has formed the basis for commitment by member churches of the World Council of Churches. And the article of dialogue, this article quotes Martin Buber, which is, I said, so I just mentioned, at the core of this interfaith dialogue, interfaith commitment. The dialogue is always from faith to faith, in Buber's words, from, I quote, one open-hearted person to another open-hearted person. So this dialogue, I and you. And Christians have welcomed Dabru Emet in 2000, which is a Jewish statement on Christian and Christianity, which implications are that Jewish-Christian dialogue is best pursued if Jews cherish their own tradition. And Dabru Emet is a reaction to Dominus Jesus by Cardinal Ratzinger in 2000, where interreligious dialogue was described as a part of the evangelizing mission of the church. So in other words, dialogue in Cardinal Ratzinger's mind is meant as an expression of mission, dialogue as a purpose of mission. Strictly speaking, in Aristotelian framework, it represents, I would say, the most interested friendship that one can consider. Cardinal Ratzinger takes on the spirit of friendship, replacing old-fashioned traditional disputations by friendly theological discussions. But as David Berger pointed it out in an article in Jerusalem Post, I quote, dialogue would then become an instrument of religious imperialism. And I would end with the last example of a dictionary of the another dictionary of the Jewish-Christian dialogue in 1995, and I quote about this relation, which are not dialogical, but an interchange of monologues. I quote, the Jewish people have suffered centuries of persecution and contempt, leaving images, if not scars, difficult to erase, a feeling of disillusionment, inviting self-righteousness and distrust. The Jewish dialogue partner requires signs, gestures of friendship and fraternity to erase these images. He needs to be reassured of the seriousness of Christian commitment to friendship. Otherwise, the dialogue will become just another form of the old threat of denial and of conversionary activity. So while there is a growing effort to revisit history from a different perspective and emphasize more positive aspects of Jewish-Christian relations, it's important to recognize that this does not necessarily equate to friendship, whether it represents an attempt to cast a different light on historical events while acknowledging the complexities and challenges that marked those interactions throughout history. So I would conclude considering disinterested friendship in interfaith engagement, because disinterested friendship, if you have followed me, is genuine friendship without any interest of utility or goal. In our exploration of these challenges and nuances surrounding Jewish-Christian relations and interfaith engagement, we have encountered the fundamental question: why has it often proven difficult for ancient and modern societies to cultivate genuine friendship through Jewish studies, the learning of the Hebrew language, or the establishment of friendly relationships with Jewish individuals? Because most of the time, people, or Christian people, I would say, think that interfaith engagement or friendship is the effort to overcome difference by finding what we have in common. As Emmanuel Levin has denounced it, to reduce difference in harmonizing opposites. And I do think that it is exactly the opposite. Genuine dialogue is to acknowledge and respect and learn about difference and recognize that the difference is really there, and it does not have to be an impediment to our living together. Why? Because true friendship is for the sake of the other, for the sake of the friend, as a centripetal logic, not as a centrifugal logic. Because true friendship in the Aristotelian way of defining is to open oneself to the other for himself, for his own sake. In other words, devoting time and energy to encounter the other by, let's say, discovering his language, learning Hebrew, for example, without any purpose of accumulating knowledge, of sharing faith, or proselytizing, is the deepest move of Aristotelian friendship, the openness and the respect of the different, without reducing this difference of the other to the sameness, and being open to the extreme of this difference. And to me, this represents genuine interfaith dialogue, far from any pseudo-Irenism or religious harmonization. To encounter the other for his own sake means the exact opposite of any form of instrumentalization or harmonization. We just need to delve into the difference of each other, which has not to be an impediment for our living together, and which could fulfill the definition of Aristotle friendship. And I thank you for your attention and would be very willing and glad to answer your question.
Thank you so much. Okay, lots of questions. And I think the idea of a totally disinterested friendship where there's no utilitarian goal, I think is very challenging. So there, a lot of the questions are on that, where you just ended. One person asked, do you think that there actually can be disinterested friendship between Jews and Christians in the 21st century? One person asked, if the, let's say that you have a goal with interfaith dialogue and engagement of world peace. Does that make it utilitarian? someone raised the example of, which I didn't know about, that I guess Cardinal Dolan in New York just made a significant, very significant donation to the Jewish Community's Emergency Fund for Israel. Can we see that as being sort of a genuine encounter, or how do we know when there's for ourselves or looking at someone else's actions, the actions of the other, if it's utilitarian or not? I think is the ultimate question, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, this is absolute great and yes, great question, and this is the questions we have to ask. But well, my purpose was really to reframe the Aristotelian definition in order to be very clear and square with the aim of friendship and the essence of friendship, in order to be able to think with you about what is true friendship. For example, when you say, when you ask about world peace, which is the aim, and is it then utilitarian or not, I would say, let's focus on the real practice of true friendship, and then you will have as consequence world peace. But I mean, if you try to be a real Aristotelian, then you will have fruits of your practice, of your daily practice, and your day after day practice of friendship. And world peace will come with the demanding practice of true friendship in the very deep of your intention. See what I mean? So Aristotle is very helpful, I would say, because it's always this criteria, questioning yourself and asking, are you in the very deep of the true friendship? And if you are, then peace can come. I mean, then the good fruits of this friendship can come. And I like also the question, which is not naive at all, can true friendship how would you say, true friendship, it can really be in the 21st century? Well, I would say I have a dream that it would really be, and I have examples in mind between Jews and Christian friends, and I would say it's happened. I don't know how often, if often or not, but for example, I can tell you that as a personal example, if I may confess about my own example, that I study Hebrew 6 hours a day, and it's not for any kind of purpose, or it's just because I just love Hebrew, and it's fascinating for me just to encounter the other and the language of my Jewish friends. And it's not for accumulating learning, which I have on other sides. You know what I mean? So yes, I do think, and I also do dream that it really can really happen in 21st century.
Thank you. So, one thing I started thinking about as you were answering that question is there's an organization founded by one of our alumni called Encounter that brings American Jewish leaders to Israel to have kind of very carefully facilitated encounters with Palestinians, and they engineer or facilitate similarly carefully arranged encounters between Israelis and Palestinians. And many people, I think, see this as a very political organization, but really kind of the beginning and the end of the goal is to facilitate the encounter, which I think is what you're talking about. And and if that leads somewhere more peaceful, that's a good thing. But if you start with that as the goal, it almost compromises the enterprise. it's something I was thinking about that people may be familiar with. So there was another question earlier that relates to what you just said also. The question is, you know, and when you went to an example, it was kind of personal, right? Personal examples that you thought of. So one person asked, can you have this kind of friendship on, you know, sort of a community to community scale, kind of official Jewish Christian dialogue, or are we really talking about something that can only happen between, you know, between individuals, between small groups interacting?
Yes, yes. Of course, it's different scales, I admit, but I would say let's keep the same mindset. It's a point of mindset, even if the scales are different. The mindset according to the Aristotelian frame, meaning that you always question your deep intention of being friends or encounter the other, even in a broader association or broader communities. It's the intention and the mindset which is more important than the ground, if it's an individual relationships or more community encounters. You know, it's I would say each of us can just question oneself, and then you can live in community or just have personal relation. I mean, this question can be applied to many other issues. Is it individual or communitarian? I say,
So,
well, yes.
sorry, go ahead.
No. Yes, it's all the question of ethics and philosophy, moral philosophy. You can always broaden the mindset of one ethical practice. Aristotle said that you have ethics, and then you have domestic, and then you have politics. But the very core of the moral is firstly ethics, meaning from the individual, and then you open it to the family, and then you open it to the state. And the state is the more, according to Aristotle politics, the state is the more perfect in entirety of practicing ethics, but it begins with the individual.
Right. That's interesting. So, I mean, you also have the phenomenon where you can have, whether it's the state or other kind of high-level representatives of a group coming together and engaging at what seems like respectful dialogue in a way that they haven't actually brought the members of the group along with them. Are you following me? There's so I wonder what you think about so I guess if there's genuine encounter happening on that kind of level of group representatives, is it significant? If it doesn't necessarily, if the group isn't necessarily on board with kind of respectful dialogue happening among leaders of different groups or the state, with the example that you gave.
Yes, of course, leaders represent the postures of each communities, so they have to be very careful of keeping this mindset of disinterestedness. And this is why in 2000 it was so shocking to read what was read, because this genuine friendship has to be officially practiced. This genuine friendship has to be announced like the true practice of friendship and encounters and dialogues. So it has to be said that it can't be any other aim. It can't be any other purpose of friendship and encounters, meaning religious are the purpose. Otherwise, it's not real dialogue and friendship. And most of the time, it's what is not understood.
Few people asked about, if a Christian, if a Christian person or leader or or community is of the belief that, from kind of, you could say from sort of pure religious motives, not xenophobia or racism, but if they're of the belief that everyone has to accept Christ to be saved, and a Jewish person is not, can it happen, or does it happen that that there can be real friendship there, at least from the Christian side?
I see. And that's, yes, that's why I found Aristotle so fascinating and so powerful. It's because it's not the point of religious conviction or religious motives. In a way, he goes beyond religious motives, because in a way, I would say he's more pure than religious goal, because he proposed an alternative to religious convictions, an alternative going beyond, and I would say like something more genuine. So when you say, of course, for some Christians, it could be very difficult to be true friends with Jewish people because of their own religious motives. But if we strictly apply Aristotle criteria, it works out. And it works out, ethically speaking, that you don't try to pull something from the other or because of your religion. You just try to respect the other, and there is no religious motives anymore, because you just consider the other for the other and not according your own point of view or according his own point of view. You know what I mean? So, and that's why also I love Emmanuel Levinas, because it's exactly what Levinas said. Levinas said you just have to put aside your own religious motives or convictions or faith or whatever. And with Aristotle and Levinas, I think you can go further than religion practicing. You can go further in the way of ethics, in the way of the good, in the way of peace, because you are applying and practicing the genuine feelings of disinterestedness. And then, to me, there is a stronger, a more powerful humanism, ethic humanism, to practice Aristotle than to practice one's own religious convictions. See what I mean? In a framework of moral philosophy or in a framework of ethics. I'm not sure I'm very clear with my explanation, but I'm meaning to let you think about the way to go further and beyond when you put aside the religious convictions and you just apply an ethical philosophy framework.
Yeah, yes, no, you were clear. So one person, kind of summarized Jewish, the Jewish experience in history, throughout history, as if they're trying to either convert us or kill us, right? So I guess from your perspective as someone who is very familiar with Jewish history, do you think that Jews can, is there a basis for kind of trusting that that other people are engaging in the kind of encounter and exchange that you're saying is the one that succeeds, which I think that is the type of encounter that succeeds and that brings us somewhere also. But there's Jewish sense often that we can't really trust. We can't trust that we're in a position of safety, I guess.
Yes, I perfectly understand. I can perfectly understand this posture and this belief and this sense of distrusting. And I would say, let's respect it for itself. To go further and further in this deep intention of respecting the other for its own sake, and also of respecting the true difference of the other, including his fears, his misconfidence, his, of course, it has to be taken in a whole package, I would say. Of course, people are distrusting, and it makes sense. And how wouldn't it make sense otherwise, regarding to the history of the relationships? So these fears and this, how do you say, misconfidence? How do you say in English? The fact that you don't trust people.
Distrust, mistrust.
Yes, mistrust. Yes, of course. This mistrust has to be respected. Totally respected, and no one has to force to convince well, I'm your friend, I want to convince you. No, I don't mean to convince you, as it's just my deep intention to live genuine friendship. I don't mean to convince anyone. It's just it's from me to me to be to try to be the purest practitioner of genuine friendship, for the sake of the other, for the sake of my friends, for the sake of genuine friendship, and not to convince, or not to attract, or not to try to make someone change his mind. Am I clear?
You are clear. I'm just, there's so many interesting comments coming in. I'm just trying to navigate them a little bit. I mentioned the example of the organization Encounter. Someone else suggested the example of Daniel Barenboim's Israel-Palestine Divan Orchestra. I wonder if there are other, you talked about individual friendships, but are there other initiatives that you're aware of, whether today, whether in Jewish Christian engagement, or or Jewish Muslim, or in any kind of interreligious engagement, that you think, that you see as examples of the kind of disinterested encounter that you're talking about?
Yes, there are plenty of, I wouldn't be able to list or to name people. There are plenty of, for example, books written on history of Jewish relationships with the Christian church in the 20th century. And there are plenty of things, but it's not the point of numbers or the point of who wrote what book. It's, well, and also there's this pitfall of judging this kind of cases, like judging, are they true enough according to Aristotle criteria? Well, it's always this pitfall, or yes, judging or estimating if it's true or not. And I would say it's not my business. It's none of my business. And I admire all the efforts, and I admire all those people who are struggling to make bridges and to make for example, signs of repenting, or any kind of things. But yes, who am I to speak about that? I can't. I'm not a good person.
You're a scholar. Someone asked earlier about Nostra Aetate, and I wonder if there's anything you want to comment on there in the context of what you've been talking about.
Yes, sure. Nostra Aetate. So this big decree of Vatican II was, let's summarize the saying, was a step forward in the Christian mind of towards Jewish religion, Jewish people. But you know, Nostra Aetate has also its boundaries, its downsides, because it has always been reproached that in the text of Nostra Aetate, Vatican II, Council Vatican II never condemned anti-Semitism. It decried, but not condemned. So it was also kind of ambiguous, and there were, well, the main reproach from the Jewish part, and it makes sense, is that in this text there is any recognition of Christian guilt for Jewish suffering. And that point would, some people think that it would have been repaired, fixed, when the Pope John Paul II came to Israel and acknowledged for and made penitence in front of the wall. So yes, well, Nostra Aetate was a step forward, but not a final step, a beginning.
So there was maybe we can squeeze in one more, or maybe two more, but maybe one. There was an interesting question about gender, and if you think that, or has there been research exploring the way the person asked it, they wrote, has there been any research exploring gender differences among interfaith friendships? So I guess, you know, slightly more broadly, is there any kind of correlation between gender and, you know, and the encounters that you're talking about? And, you know, people sometimes say, well, I won't comment.
Yes. Well, I don't have any title which immediately occurs, but it might be a lot of titles and books. But I would say this is a very great question because of the point of marriage and love more than friendship. But you know, it's all this question according to Aristotle: is friendship love? Is love friendship? It's not exactly the same, because with love into a marriage, you have another definition of what is friendship. So you have other goals, other daily practice. So I always argue saying that we don't have to confuse friendship and let's call it agape in Greek, or caritas in Latin, because in friendship it's without these deep feelings which could be passionate, also in passionate love, something more peaceful in friendship. So yeah, there are a lot of difference, but the question of marriage is essential, because into the marriage you have kind of conjugal friendship. Marriage can be equated to conjugal friendship too, between the husband and the wife. So yes, it's also it can be, well, for sure it's a daily experience into a couple that you live for the sake of the other. I mean, when everything is all right, of course.
Is there any reason to think that women are kind of have the faculties, the capabilities to approach friendship the way you're talking about more than men?
It can be discussed, it can be debated. At least Aristotle never speak about that, for sure.
Right.
For sure, no. So that's interesting. But well, it can be argued if women are more gifted to live this kind of friendship. I don't want to. No, I don't have any prejudice about that. are women also more gifted for love than men? Well, it's a huge debate. I'm a woman, so it's difficult for me to argue about more gifted posture in women in gender, but well.
That's fair enough. I think that I mean, you said this, but I think the lessons of what the core lesson of what you're talking about, it really does transcend religion. It really pertains to any kind of relationship and can have an impact down the road, I think, across any kind of conflict. I think that's what I'm thinking about from what you're saying. And I think, with all of the with everything that's going on, that's in our minds and hearts, Israel and Gaza, I think it's so relevant. I hope it's all right with people. I'm listening to many podcasts lately. I'm sure everyone is consuming news in all kinds of forms. But I listen often to the New York Times podcast, The Daily, and they're among many others. And there was an episode, I think last Friday, called 1948. And I almost hesitated to listen to it. And I was so glad that I did, because really what it did was it very patiently went through different narratives in a way that you could really hear both. And it wasn't trying to talk about one being, I mean, it went through kind of a historical record and fact, but that wasn't really the point. The point of it was understanding, the experience of each side and kind of what's the history that's being carried by both sides into this conflict. So kind of inspired by what you're saying, it's a helpful frame for me to think about that episode and why it was so powerful for me. So for what it's worth, I'll recommend it to folks. And thank you.
Thanks to you.
It's very it's not so often that kind of a very philosophically oriented session can speak so directly to conflict that feels very immediate right now. So I'm very grateful to you for bringing us this session at this time, and really appreciate your ability to distill big ideas into something that we can really feel and understand at this moment.
Thank you. It's really my pleasure to be able to not to help, but to think with you and to share thoughts with you.
Thank you. I want to again thank our sponsors for today, from Temple Israel of Albany. We're so grateful to you for your support of the series and today's session. And I also want to invite folks back a week from today, November 20th. We have Dr. Aaron Kohler, who is adjunct professor at JTS this semester and professor of Near East Studies at Yeshiva University. He'll be looking at a Talmudic text with us. The session is called "Do Good Fences Make Good Neighbors?" but it's really asking, how much do we owe other people in our society? Where do our obligations lie when it comes to our own needs and taking care of the needs of others? So I hope that folks will join us again next week. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our sponsor again, and thank you so much to Dr. Sere for being at JTS this semester and for teaching us today.
Thanks to all of you.